You might have heard already about the hapless old octogenarian from the heartland here in the U.S. who was lured into the metaverse around 10 years ago and never seen or heard again. It's one of those urban legends that morphs over time, a cautionary and familiar tale with mystical twists and turns as the old man wanders Starship Earth in search of a home. Sometimes he is depicted as a caricature, a cartoon. It softens the serious undercurrent of an old mortal man nearing the end of his long noir journey. But in fact, my friend, it is not a myth. You see, I am that old man, and this is how the story actually unfolded. It began in late afternoon on a cold and bleak December day. I was an unimportant government employee, a powerless, invisible, and expendable aging wonk. I saw corruption and cruelty, vice, crime, and many other forms of evil at the state and federal level all around me, but could do little or nothing to stop it. I was ignored, rebuked, and often punished for my efforts. My heart ached for the victims, and it finally broke. I left my office next to our state capitol that day, walked outside, took a deep breath, and looked up into the early evening sky for inspiration. It was filled with ominous, strange, and suspicious-looking patterns. We had seen it before in recent months. Aluminum nanoparticles, some of the other wonks whispered. Billions of tiny razor blades that penetrate the cuneiform plate with every breath we take and shatter our brain. Others around the department insisted. It was all nonsense, they said. Nothing to see here, folks. Move on. Now, I had no idea what it was all about, but decided to leave anyway and eventually wandered into an unfamiliar city far from home. It was one of those places where you're always looking over your shoulder. I walked for a long while and took it all in. It looked much like many other American cities I had seen in recent decades, perhaps a bit cleaner and more culturally advanced. There were no bodies laying in the streets and fewer rats, but the air was foul and the sirens frequent. I eventually came to a curious place called Weed World. We don't have anything like that in Iowa, so I stopped in to look around. I met these two fellows, but I had no idea what they were talking about. It was like a foreign language. Indica, sativa, pre-rolls, edibles, THC, CBDs, bongs, hybrids. I was lost, so I left. Around the corner, there was Weed Central. It was busier. They were all nice guys, pharmacists, I think. They called themselves bud tenders. They seemed to be selling some kind of medicine. It was the kind of place the old folks would call quackery when I was a kid growing up in the early 1950s, and much more informal than the pharmacies we have in Iowa. Now, a few doors down, I found this place, I Need Weed. The bud tender was very knowledgeable. He said he'd been using it since elementary school, but still got a college degree in criminal justice and was on the honor roll. Sweet, I thought. He encouraged me to try 100 milligrams of Kiva milk chocolate. It's a hybrid strain, he said. I nodded and said all right, as if I knew what he meant, and paid him $20 for a little candy bar. Then he directed me over to the cannabis-friendly Metaverse Motel in the nicer part of town. I sat down at the motel computer and Googled the latest news. I was hungry, so I ate the whole Kiva bar. It was delicious. A bit too much, though, I eventually realized, for a rookie. Because 4 hours later I was staring with awe and wonder into the computer screen. Kiva consciousness, I surmised. Images flew around like birds in an aviary. They would land in front of me for a moment and quickly take flight as another arrived in its place. What magic, I marveled. The past, present, and future, just beyond the screen in front of me, like the Akashic record, if I can find my way around the vast and mysterious metaverse. This, of course, was all quite a revelation for a boy who grew up when television was a new idea. And then suddenly Mark Zuckerberg himself appeared inside my computer and miraculously reached his hand through the screen and guided me personally into his metaverse. But the truth is, my friend, I was not lured. I went on my own volition, and all was well in the beginning. But then things got edgy, and I soon realized I was not in Iowa anymore. In fact, I had no idea where I was going, or who to trust. It was a journey of the mind, and I was heading into uncharted lands, without a map or compass. As many of you know, the metaverse can be a very threatening, dangerous, or even deadly place. But I was already in, so I pushed on. I wandered for quite a while, and suddenly, as if a divine hand intervened and guided me to him, I met a fellow named Tesla. He was a genius with piercing eyes. "Stick around," he said, "while I work in my lab. We can chat later." So I did. That evening, he began talking about pyramids. I was all in. You see, I've been interested in pyramids since I was a little boy growing up in the early 1950s. And I was around 30 years old in 1975 when I discovered Patrick Flanagan's book called Pyramid Power. He was around a year older than I, but considerably smarter. It fueled my interest in it all, and I began experimenting with pyramids and frequencies on my own. I could not understand what Tesla was saying, but he assured me that practical experience would fill in the gaps over time. If you want to find the secrets of the universe, he said, explore energy, frequency, and vibration. And, he said, pyramids hold secrets worth knowing. I said, yeah, okay, and eventually headed out again into the void until I came across a somewhat familiar pyramid. And that led me to the Yucatan Peninsula, Chichen Itza, 1975. Around 50 years ago, a half century. There I was. I was around 30 years old by then, well into my solitary quest to understand the mystery of pyramids. I was not a tourist here, my friends. I was there on a solemn mission to find truth. For 3 days I went up those steep stairs and sat for hours, always aware that long ago only holy men could enter this sacred chamber. I was teaching judo, hatha yoga, weight training, and other New Age physical education skills to undergraduates at the University of Iowa back then. But I was an unlikely flower child. A few years earlier, I was a 22-year-old U.S. Army infantry team leader in a remote kill zone facing off against North Korean special operators during the long, hot, and wet Korean summer of 1968. Historians now call it the Second Korean War. So by 1975, I had been to the dark side and longed to take refuge in reason and a contemplative life. Fate had other plans, though, and it has been a long journey to faraway lands and distant regions of my own consciousness. All along the way, I explored pyramids and other sacred places when possible. Just as those thoughts were crossing my mind, I was transported through the metaverse to my old house 20 years ago in 2005. I was in one of my studies. There were some old books and one of my copper pyramids. Crude cardboard walls with aluminum covering, pure blind guesswork. I slept in it every night, meditated in the dark for hours. So I crawled inside that old pyramid right then, sat in Padmasana, and closed my eyes for what seemed like years. Pure bliss. And then I heard a distant, familiar sound. 432 hertz. I began to breathe in harmony with the music. Slowly in through my nostrils and gently out with pursed lips. The music grew closer, louder, until I was immersed in it, surrounded by it. My entire body, mind, and spirit was vibrating. I opened my eyes and it was 2015, 10 years ago. Under two pyramids, practicing HAARP-optimized pulmonary education, HOPE, with a simple diatonic harmonica. Who would have thought? Energy, frequency, vibration, music, motion, mindfulness. There it was. So simple, so profound. I blinked, and suddenly I was back in my chair at the Metaverse Motel, watching it all unfold on the computer screen in front of me. The sun was coming up, and the Kiva effect was waning. I checked the date, and it was 2025. 10 years. I have no idea where it went, and it's too early for me to make any judgments about pyramid power. 10 more years of practice, perhaps, maybe more.